Up, everybody? Welcome. Hello, hello, hello. We are hitting up live. Going to answer your questions. I haven't been live on YouTube in a long time, but I'm pumped to be here, and I'm going to actually be scheduling in a time where I go live weekly, which I'm going to be very excited about. Um, so I'm going to answer your questions. We got lots of questions that were submitted, and they're always good questions. The questions are ones that are relevant. I mean, you'll be able to submit a question every week. You can go to askmarkgroves.com and submit a question, and you'll get the opportunity to get potentially your question answered. So, pumped to be here. Just got married, just had a kid, did all the things, and excited to chat about and answer these questions for you. So let's kick it off. First one is I don't have the names of the people who asked them, but the first question here, good timing for all of you to join. This is going to be available on recording, so you're going to get it on, you can watch it on repeat. Okay, so first question. I recently started seeing this guy who's afraid to commit long term because he loves his independence. He doesn't want to feel reliant on anyone, including his partner, in his decisions because his work schedule can be sporadic with travel. He believes that he craves heartbreak and pain for the storyline. Wow. And he isn't sure if it's a problem from childhood or if he's actually just content having people come and go in his life. He also believes most men are unhappy in marriage. He claims to love this life the way it is, but does think it could be possible to commit to me. His affection is incredible. He's open to having emotionally vulnerable conversations and really likes me. Should I run, or is it possible this is an opportunity to explore, dive deeper together, and also as individuals? I have an idea, but so curious to hear your thoughts as a recovering avoidant. Oh my God, this is such a great question. And hello, Ellie. Thank you for the congrats. So we've got a guy who's afraid of commitment long term because he loves his independence. He doesn't want to feel reliant on a partner in his decisions because his work is sporadic. He believes he might crave heartbreak and pain for the storyline, and he's not sure if it's a problem from childhood. Probably is. And he thinks most men are unhappy in marriage. What should I do? Is it possible? He thinks it might be. Okay, well, first off, when someone is saying, I don't believe in relationship or marriage, it's a distancing tactic. Look, like when someone says, I'm not sure I can commit, they're telling the truth. And part of the other pattern that we tend to have on the other side of that matches to someone like that is we're like, oh, great. I might as well do the work. I can be the person that this person changes for. Newsflash, generally not. That's like a romantic, hopeful idea. And maybe that comes from watching rom-coms, et cetera, et cetera. But to me, I'm like, it's not necessary. It's kind of time wasted. Not wasted because you learned something, but let's get into this. He doesn't want to feel reliant on anyone. A lot of the time, because people get wounded when they needed somebody, they believe that not needing someone is the solution to never getting wounded. That's not it. It's that as kids, we probably needed somebody who wasn't reliable and maybe weaponized our neediness, right? So we became needless, or we're just never into a relationship because we don't want to need anybody. I was saying this to Kai the other day and Kai's my wife, if you don't know that. On our like third date, I remember saying to her, what do you need from a relationship? And she just started laughing like, I don't need anything. And I was like, what do you mean you don't need anything? I was like, that's so Beyonce, you know? It's like, I don't need no man. It's like, it's okay to need people. It's just you don't want to depend on people for your well-being, Like when needing someone compromises yourself, then that's not healthy needing, right? Like healthy relationships are a balance of two people's needs. Now, I gave her the example, which is relevant to our life today, but I said, imagine that you've been taking care of a kid all day at home. And I walk into the door and there's two circumstances that happen. One, I just take a left. I'm like, yo, what's up? Thanks for taking care of the kid. I go watch TV. I go do something. Or the other one, I come, grab the baby from your hands, and I say, I got you. You go lay down. You go take care of yourself. Do you need someone in that circumstance? Like, do you see, like, relationships are about being able to depend on one another. So when someone says, I don't want to need people or I have no needs, that right to me is like orange flag, unprocessed stuff about not knowing how to trust people, not knowing how to trust closeness. People who avoid intimacy and closeness don't trust intimacy and closeness. They were probably wounded by intimacy and closeness. So they don't trust themselves and they don't trust others when they get close. So I'd say automatically that's my thought about this person based on what you shared. He thinks most men are unhappy in marriages. Are some men and women or people unhappy in marriages? Absolutely. Are men and women sometimes unhappy in relationships? Absolutely. Are most men unhappy in marriage? No. And the interesting thing is that in the research, women actually get bored of monogamy faster than men. But think about the cultural narrative that we send about men. So this is just participating in that similar narrative. I'd say that he is projecting the idea that men are unhappy in relationship so he can justify not getting close in relationship. And brilliant unconscious tactic. All of these are unconscious tactics, you know. It's it's being able to process what lives between your inability to get close to other people that needs to be done, and it's done through processing it. So this guy says he claims he loves his way of life the way it is. So it doesn't sound like he's wanting to compromise. Most avoidants aren't. Their life is constructed around self. People who have an anxious tend to have an anxious patterns. They tend to not be able to create space with other people. They're afraid of space between them and other. They compromise themselves for relationship. People who are avoidant compromise relationship for self. So this is about finding that balance that we all need to find. How do you do that, right? How do I maintain who I am and be in a relationship with you and not lose myself? So listen, he says he's open to having emotionally vulnerable convos. He really likes me. His affection is incredible. But this hot cold, this ambivalence, right? You get the closeness. And then he says something like, I'm afraid to commit long term. Mostly what people do will stay in this pattern. Not saying you're going to do this, question asker, but most people, what they'll do is stay in this relationship pattern. They'll stay in the space of hoping this person will change. They'll desire commitment. I'll finally be the one who makes them choose commitment and heals their childhood shit. Cool. That's great. But here's what has never led to someone healing their childhood shit, tolerating their childhood shit. That has never led to someone healing it. Tolerating someone's stuff has never led to them changing it. Saying to someone, look, I'm looking for a relationship. I know you're saying you're not sure if you can. I'm not interested in participating and creating a connection with you if you can't do the work to resolve what's holding you back from closeness. I'm not going to do that work for you. Here's what I would mean doing the work for me. I think you need to work with a therapist or a coach or read a book on it. You need to process these things because till you do, I can't live in a relationship where I'm not sure if you're going to stay. I'm not sure if you're going to go. I'm not sure if you want a long-term relationship or not. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not here to fuck around like that. This is the way that we have to live our relational lives. Is like, listen, when someone says, I'm going to change, I'm going to do the thing, and then they never do the thing, they never book the thing, they never actually become what they say they're going to become, that's a fucking red flag. It's a big red flag. And what it says is that you can't trust what people are telling you and committing to. And when you stay in relationship with people who are inconsistent and you can't trust what they're telling you or saying to you or the commitments they're making, you won't trust yourself anymore because you leave yourself in connection with other people who are not trustworthy. So essentially, you're putting yourself in circumstances that are not safe psychologically and emotionally. And when we do that, we will feel anxious. We'll feel ambivalent. We'll start to put on weight. We'll develop inflammation. These types of physiological responses happen when we self-abandon and when we are putting ourselves in unsafe relational circumstances. So my thoughts are you got to bring forward what connection means for you and what you would need to see from him. But when you want to enter into a long-term relationship with someone and they say, I'm actually afraid to commit long-term, and really the response is, what are you going to do about it? So that's what I would say is have a very serious, straightforward conversation expressing what you actually need and want. Okay, we got another question. These are all questions that people submitted today. And as I said, I'm going to try to do them. I'm going to get a predictable time every week, but I'm thinking Thursdays at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Just can't do that next week, but that's what's going to start happening. And you're going to be able to submit questions at askmarkgroves.com. You can go there right now and do that. And I'll try to answer as many questions as I can in the time that I do. Okay, second question. What would be the necessary steps to figure out which path to take in life? If your heart is being pulled in two different directions, how do you know which one is the right one? Is there even a right one? I can't differentiate between what my gut is telling me versus my heart anymore. You know what? I generally don't think it's gut versus heart. I think it's gut versus brain or heart versus brain. Um, the part of different there's big life decisions that we have, right? Choosing to stay in a relationship or leave, choosing to start one or not, choosing to do a job or not, choosing to start a business or not, choosing to express or not. There's big things that we have to decide we're going to do with our lives. And I think that's some of the hardest, biggest decisions we have to make. Now, here's the thing. I personally don't think there are wrong decisions. And I'll explain what I mean by that. And that is that if you decide to leave a relationship and that's everything that your gut's been telling you and your pain and your frustration, you will gather information when you leave. If you leave and all of a sudden you're like, shit, like I didn't realize what I had. That happens to people, right? But also there's other people who leave and they're like, I didn't realize what I was carrying, right? So the gift of making a choice is that you gain more information. And it's through the information that you gain that you recognize what you want to choose moving forward. Sometimes that means we can go back and choose the thing that we wished we had chosen, but sometimes it means we can't. But what happens is instead of living in a prison of regret, where we're constantly lamenting and thinking about that moment in the past, had I said this, done this, been this, I'd have a different life today, which is not actually true because you didn't do it. And you wouldn't have the information that you have if you hadn't made the choice. So we're not honoring the experience of the choice when we hold ourselves hostage to a previous moment that we can't relive. But what we can do is move forward in our lives with this new wisdom and actually make choices based on what we now know. So that's what I'm inviting you to do. Take what you're feeling and start to balance out, what are my two choices? What are the benefits of staying? What are the benefits of going? What are the benefit of going left versus right? Which part is my conditioning? Was I taught to want this one thing versus the other? That's the thing that I see most with people is that they're in a battle with their conditioning. They're in a battle with what they were taught was right or good or moral or whatever. And I'm not saying be immoral. I'm talking about how we moralize the idea of staying in a relationship versus not. We consider it smart to get a job that is career-based versus being an entrepreneur, or getting a certain type of degree versus not, or getting a certain education versus not, or whatever. We are taught all these things about what the value of something is, of how society values something. But do you know if every artist made the choice to become an artist based on whether society valued their art in the moment of their art, no one would become an artist, right? Like if we base our decisions based on what other people perceive our decisions should be, then we are actually operating from a codependent place, right? We're saying what you think about my choices in my life matter more than what I think. So the other question I would ask if someone's making a choice is I would say, if you could choose just as you and there not be any consequences, what would you choose? Like if you could choose to start that business and you wouldn't have to hear your parents criticize you or your friends say, what are you doing? It's crazy. Would you do it? Right. And we want to surround ourselves with people who speak hope into us. What I find is so often when we're waking up to possibility and potential and how we want to love and who we want to be and what kind of life we want to choose, when you wake up in one area of life, you can't help but wake up in all of them. That's just how it works. Because if you step out of what's expected of you in love and you're no longer reactive and you decide to, heal your family stuff and you decide to get good at managing conflict and having deep conversations, you're changing the family tree. Well, the family around you is going, what are you doing? What are you doing? I can't believe, oh, now you're conscious. Now you're having these conversations. Oh, you want to talk? You have boundaries. Oh, nice. Where'd you get those? Right? Like we're going to shift the systems around us. When we start shifting the systems around us and we see that we're good, like we're good no matter what. Like I feel great because I'm choosing myself. Oh, wow. And these people are criticizing my choice, but instead of me dancing for them so I feel good, I now get to be with myself, right? Like I get to feel good. I'm recognizing that the source of my goodness, my feeling good, actually comes from me being aligned, me trusting myself, me using my voice, right? So when we start to see that, right, we start to actually get a greater relationship with our intuition and our gut. When you start to listen to the voice, to the call, speak up, say something, start this, end this, whatever it is, learn this. When you need to change this pattern. When you start answering those calls, you start to trust your voice more. And it is through that ability to be with ourselves and to ask questions like, is this my conditioning? There's a question that I love Dr. Alexander Solomon asks, which is this my trauma or my truth? And I think that is a great differentiator for deciding what we want to do and how we're reacting in relationships. Okay, next question. I just ended an almost 8-month-long relationship. He moved in officially 6 months after we met, although he was staying at my place 1 month after 1 month together. Hey, yo. A week after his move was official, I discovered he was having an on and off relationship for 8+ years with another girl, who was also the reason his previous official relationship of 7 years didn't work. I forgave him, big mistake, in brackets. Then 2 weeks later, I found out he paid a prostitute for sex. 2 weeks after that, he was plotting behind my back, trying to convince this girl he was on and off again with to let him move in with her. Good God, this guy. I am in shock still. I just kicked him out 2 days ago. How can someone be like this? Why? I treated him like a king at home. I'm a good looking woman, an educated career homeowner. I even lost an extra 20 pounds to be super slim. And this girl was living in government housing, no education, no job, and a drug addict. What am I missing here? How can this be explained? Please help. Well, listen, people who don't value other people, it doesn't matter how valuable we might be ourselves, right? Like when we shift and change ourselves to try to keep somebody, unless it's a positive growth, like actual growth in terms of changing how reactive we are or something like that. But if we like actually go change our physiology, go change things in order to keep people, and it's coming from this place, or like we go buy something new to have to get a partner. I mean, it's coming from a place of scarcity. And first off, massive red flag that he was still in an on and off again relationship, as you're saying. Big mistake for forgiving him. 8+ years with another relationship. And he had a 7-year official relationship during that 8+ years. And then he's in a relationship with you. This is not a problem of whether you're a hot, educated homeowner who got super slim and lost 20 pounds, and the other person is not educated, government housing, drug addict. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with someone whose inability to be with truth, someone who's unable to be honest, somebody who's unable to communicate, someone who's unable to be close with other people. That's what this has to do with. This guy, it's not he could be presented with the greatest woman who's an emotional communicator, who's great at holding space, but has to hold fucking boundaries. Like that type of person, when no one holds consequences for them, they just continue with their behavior, So it doesn't matter what you present someone who can't hold closeness, they can't hold closeness. And this is a mistake that we make relationally, is when something doesn't work out, or you're in a relationship with someone who's a liar, a cheater, or whatever, we make it about us. We're like, what is wrong with me that they did these things? Instead of, what is up with them that they don't value a human who's trying to love them? Now, if we're going from the compassionate lens, which does not mean letting them back in your life, definitely not. I wouldn't do that. The compassionate lens would look at what has he been through that has made him be that way. He's probably got unresolved trauma. He probably has, I'm guessing, a parent who had infidelity. Who knows? but there's a lack of an ability to be with closeness. And there's also a lack of an ability to be with honesty and integrity. And so the best thing we can do is say, all right, well, you had an 8-month long relationship. You figured it out pretty fast, a lot quicker than the woman who was in a relationship with him for 7 years, and definitely a lot better than the on and off again 8+ year relationship. So I'd say you got away pretty good. 8 months and you're through. I mean, there's sometimes no way to explain something other than people when they haven't done the work of growing and changing and looking at their shit. There's the saying, hurt people. And this guy is a perfect example of that. But when people get hurt, they tend to make it about them. I am someone who's worthy of being hurt, as opposed to I'm someone who's worthy of being treated with respect and chosen. And I'm not going to fuck around in relationships with people who can't do that. So I'd say consider yourself very blessed and move forward and love from that space, and don't tolerate people with big red flags, like that. And I'd also look at where were the red flags earlier. A lot of the times we miss the red flags that are way earlier. Also, we have to ask ourselves, what was the part of me that was a match to him? Like, where did I miss dishonesty? Where did I let smaller red flags go? And that's how we can grow and adjust our behavior, you know? Um, and Sylvia, I'll get to that question after the next one, and I'll get to yours. So if you guys have any thoughts, feelings, put them in the chat. I'm here, I'm reading. Okay. Hello. I thought I was certain I wanted to be married. Started dating a really great guy. Turns out he doesn't want to ever get married again. I've never been married. He also made it very clear that he doesn't plan on incorporating me into his life with his kids in the near future or potentially at all. They are aware I exist and I've met them. We just don't hang out with his kids. He keeps our days separate. However, we do stuff with his friends, etc. I do really enjoy our connection and relationship. If I changed my mind about wanting to be married, does that mean I'm just settling? Honestly, if he wanted to marry me, I absolutely would. I just don't think that is going to happen because, well, he said he wouldn't. But he does want a long-term relationship. I guess ultimately, I'd be excited if we spent more time together. I only get to see him 3 days a week due to kid time, and he also enjoys time alone occasionally. I understand all of that, and I respect his boundaries. He does make an effort to see me, and he knows he has something coming up that might prevent us from hanging out on our regular scheduled times, he tells me. I appreciate his efforts for sure. I really couldn't ask for more other than maybe a little more time together and a future together where we live together if marriage is out of the question. Am I settling? This is such a great question because, first off, when someone says they don't want to get married and you do, usually the person who doesn't want to get married has maybe been married before and or grew up witnessing marriage that was unhealthy. So when someone says, I don't believe in marriage or I never want to get married, I say, well, what kind of relationship do you want to create? Because I do agree you don't have to get married to have a relationship. Marriage can create security, but security should be in a relationship that leads to marriage. Right now, it sounds like there's a lack of security, and marriage isn't going to get you security. And the fact that he never wants to and you do want to is a mismatch of desires. Now, what I would say is, I would ask him, what is it about marriage you don't like? Like, what is it that makes you never want to do it again? What's been your experience with marriage? Because, I think of it like marriage is a word, and words have their own definitions that we come up with individually and subjectively based on our experience. Like a simple example is I could say the word tree, and you and I could imagine a tree right now. And the tree I'm imagining is completely different than the tree you're imagining. Now, when I say that, what I mean is with marriage, one person can imagine great communication, great sex, great everything, expansive growth, possibility. And the other person's like divorce, infidelity, lying, abuse, financial abuse, emotional manipulation, shame, right? Like, and both are valid. Now, what often happens with couples when one person's afraid of it or whatever, or even people are getting married, is they don't actually talk about that. They don't create agreements. They don't say, what does marriage mean to you? What do you want to create? So that's what I would recommend is first get very curious about what his experience is and why does he never ever want to get married. Now, I wouldn't say that is a red flag, but I'd say it's orange. The bigger orange flag is that he doesn't plan on incorporating you in his life with his kids in the near future or potentially at all. That one cuts a little bit. Thank you, Joanna. The reason that one cuts is because that's like, is he ever going to welcome you fully in your life, into his life? Because to fully choose you, he has to integrate you fully into his life, which I understand that a parent wants to wait to introduce somebody they're in a relationship with till they're certain the relationship is good, and they don't want the kids to experience people coming and going. Other people are not mindful about that at all. So, I can understand that. And I'm also going like, okay, well, he's kind of creating two distancing tactics. One is saying he never ever wants to get married again. You do. Second is he might never introduce you to the kids. Like, do you see he's not giving you a clear timeline? He's not saying like, you know what, actually in 2 months I want to introduce, or I'll know I want to introduce you when. So I would ask, how will you know when you want to? And why do you never want to? Like, what are you hoping to achieve from that? What are you protecting them from? What are you protecting you from? What are you protecting me from? There's information in all of this. Hopefully, he's capable of actually having these conversations. Um, he might get defensive, but the point is to actually get to the truth that lives below what we're talking about. You can't let these things that are going on in a relationship fester, because they're what create anxiety and a lack of safety psychologically to open up further to people. And then when there's not security, we seek things like marriage. We seek things like having a kid. Like, why would we want to quell our excitement about creating a life with someone when they're saying, I'm not actually sure I want to create one with you. I'm not sure I actually want what you want. And we're like, oh, great. That sounds great. I can tolerate you not wanting what I want. Now, granted, as I said, you can negotiate on the idea of marriage, but I personally, this is my own personal opinion, if I was in a relationship with someone who had kids, there's not a chance that I'd want to be in a relationship with them if in the future I wasn't being integrated into their lives, because what would then happen is I'd be an aspect of their life, but I wouldn't get to be part of all of their life. It sounds great that you get to hang out with his friends and things like that. And maybe there's this fear that he has, obviously he does, about introducing you to his kids. So I would gather more information. Like, if he said, I'll introduce you when, I wouldn't say that's a big red flag or an orange flag, because he has a plan. But because there's future oriented things that he's creating ambivalence about and uncertainty, that tells me that he hasn't processed something or healed something that's about closeness and long term. Unconsciously, I would say that he certainly doesn't, and maybe consciously, he doesn't believe in the possibility of long term. So he doesn't want to commit long term because he's experienced a relationship ending that was supposed to be long term. This is why we got to do the work to process the things we learned and what we've been through, because it shows up as just these casual statements, but it's actually completely preventing us from closeness and intimacy. And so, call him forward to that. I wouldn't say you're settling, but I would say that you will be settling if you don't have the conversation and you just settle for the things the way they are. You're allowed to desire the things you want. Like, someone can have never been married and another person be divorced, and the person who was divorced say, I never want to have a wedding again, but I'll get married. And the other person saying, I never got a wedding. Like, I never got the thing you got that you don't want again. And so there has to be finding a compromise that allows both people to actually experience it. Okay. Question from the chat, Sylvia. Would you share your lessons on grief and what it's taught you? I'm currently going through the ending of a relationship and an ending of a close friendship at the same time. I mean, gosh, grief is one of the most powerful catalysts for change. It is like, to me, it is what brings you to the depth of true love. And I don't say that to minimize the experience of the loss of relationship or the loss of friendship. But it's to know that we can keep love existing even at the ending of things. And it's the same processing as exploring death, because it is the experience of death of a type. And so usually the loss of something has us have to confront grief and death. So, I mean, really, it taught me to love and to see my grief as evidence that I love, that I care, that I open up. I don't see the sadness that I experience from the loss of things as the marinating in the loss. I see it as the evidence that I am open, despite humans having so many reasons to be closed, that we stay open, right? I don't think a broken heart is one that's lost somebody. I think a broken heart is one that doesn't open again. So I'd say that there's an episode I did with Francis Weller that's really powerful. I would uh, I would check out his podcast episode. Uh, it's fantastic. And okay, Yvette, can you talk about partners who are looking for a chase, not a catch? I recently met a guy. Everything was great until he perceived I was no longer a challenge, and then he became disinterested. Well, people who are attracted to that unavailability, who play the game, they are going who have insecure form of attaching, right? They're going to become uninterested when closeness becomes available, when choice becomes available. Both anxious and avoidant people, like the people who have predispositions to those ways of attaching, are that, right? Like if someone all of a sudden chooses to love and be secure and safe and predictable to some anxious people, it'll cause them to withdraw. For someone who's avoidant, when they get close, they really want closeness, they finally get it, maybe they have sex with the person or there's intimacy, and then they withdraw. So what we need to do is weed out the people who are just around for the chase. I just did a podcast episode. It's on YouTube. It's called Is Your Partner Hot Cold? So it's, I believe, the like 3 videos ago. So just check it out. It's also wherever you listen to podcasts. It's a fantastic episode where I break down this pattern of ambivalence and also both sides of it, just to give more context to it. So I think you'll really like that. How does one overcome the paralyzing grief from estrangement from some of my children have ghosted me? Debbie, that's so painful. I would recommend working with someone to process it. I'd recommend Francis Weller's book, oh man, I forget what the main title is, but it's called The Gateways of Grief. If you look up Francis Weller grief, you'll find it. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. That's a great way to process it. I also just did a podcast episode with Megan Devine, and she is a grief expert. She has her work's called Refuge in Grief, and the podcast episode is powerful. It's all about grief. So I'd recommend checking that out. All right, next question. How does one tell between fear, self-sabotage, an avoidant attachment manifesting versus your intuition trying to speak? So how does someone tell the difference between I'm afraid of closeness and I'm just actually avoidant versus my intuition is like, this person I shouldn't be close with? I am with a wonderful man right now who checks all the boxes, emotional security, able to have hard conversations, is committed. Yet I find myself thrashing and also still looking around if there's someone else out there. I keep wondering what's wrong with me and sometimes want to cut and run. I don't think I was avoidant before my last relationship ended with a betrayal. So I'm unsure if I'm protecting myself fear or this person is not the person I'm meant to be with and to grow with instinct. This is actually really powerful. What a great question. And I think a lot of us can relate to this. So often after betrayal and infidelity, we will become avoidant. We'll maybe even become disorganized. And what that means is we'll really want relationship again. We'll want closeness. But then as soon as we get it, we run from it. We become avoidant. That was me. I went through a breakup at 19, infidelity, and I was terrified of closeness. I didn't know it, but it showed up in all my relationship patterns. I became promiscuous. I really only wanted friends with benefits. When I finally got close to somebody who was incredible, I didn't know how to keep them. I didn't want to be with them. I didn't know why, because they were awesome. And that happened even in my dating life. I dated that woman for 5 years. And then anytime I dated a woman who I had great chemistry with, who was secure, who could choose me, I ran from them. So, when we are running from someone who's really healthy, it's really great to check in with ourselves. And, that idea, what's wrong with me, is, I would invite a different way to orient towards it. I would actually meet it with curiosity instead of shame. What's wrong with me? I would say, what is unhealed here? Like, what is showing up that is unattended to, that needs presence, that needs love, that needs healing? And I would actually bring it to your partnership. I would say, listen, my last relationship, as you know, maybe they don't know, but they probably do. My last relationship had infidelity and betrayal, and it was terrifyingly painful. And I really want to heal that. I want to get close to you. You're trustworthy. I appreciate you. You're great at communicating. And yet I'm still afraid. I'm afraid of getting hurt. I'm afraid of being close to you. I'm afraid of opening up. I find myself wanting to pull back and run and find distractions. And I want to heal that. And if it's true for you, do you want to heal it with this person, or do you need more time to process on your own? Either answer is right. There's no wrong answer to that. It's not wrong to heal relational betrayal in a relationship. It's actually, that saying that our wounds occur in relationship and that's where they get healed. So really trust issues from previous relationships show up in current relationships, right? We want to check someone's phone who's never given us evidence to check their phone. We want to, get questioning about who they're talking to and what they're doing, even though this person has never given us evidence of why we should do that. So I would invite you to bring this into, because what happens is we feel shame, which you could tell from your language, that there's some shame about why don't you want this? And so we keep it secret. And then we have this secret over here, but it's actually showing itself in our relationship. We're unable to open to them. We want to run, we want to avoid. And I say, bring it to the sacredness of the relationship. Whether the relationship can hold it or not is really irrelevant. It's being able to not hide it and say, this thing is still impacting me, but I'm not going to let it make it so I can't love or open again. I'm actually going to allow it to create intimacy and closeness and actually create trust. And so, in the relationship together with the new person you're working out old betrayals with, if I was in a relationship with someone who previously experienced infidelity and they said, I really want to learn how to heal trust. You didn't break my trust. And I feel like I can trust you. I want to heal it with you. Can you help me with that? Oh my God, I'd be like, yeah, what do you need? I just need to know, like, da 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 da. And I'd be able to hear whatever request it is. And I'd be able to sit with, does this request feel fair for me? Do I have a boundary around some of these requests? Like if they were like, I need to read your phone. It's like, no, that's not going to solve it. Like, I'm not going to allow you to breach my trust and my privacy in order to heal something that's trying to bypass it for me personally. I would say like, oh yeah, you need to know who I'm meeting with or what I'm doing. You want more information about them. Totally understand. So that's what I would recommend with it. And that'll allow you to differentiate the fear from the instinct. Okay, next question. My now ex-partner would often get frustrated with me for having to repeat the same information multiple times until the point of anger or lashing out. They would tell me it just reinforces their angry behavior. Why is it so hard at times to truly grasp and retain something until it's already boiled over and it's often too late? Why does it take shit hitting the fan for us to actually make change? Oh, Lord, that's a question of our times, isn't it? Like, why does it take destruction, demolition, everything falling apart for us to pay attention? It's true relationally, it's true personally, usually. We usually need a health scare or a rock bottom. But here's the truth, you don't need those things to wake up to who you need to be and who you want to be and what you want to create. But you do need to wake up to the reality of who you are and the way you're acting. So, when I think about someone who gets frustrated and lashes out and then says it's your fault that they're lashing out. I mean, that's kind of a standard um, move of someone who has uncontrolled anger, is to blame the other person because they have shame for their uncontrolled anger. The first thing I would do is I would clean up my side of the street. So I'd work on, how do I communicate? How do I express things? How do I start conversations? How do I start arguments? How do I start bringing forward things? How do I receive those things? What do I tolerate in terms of communication? If someone gets angry and lashes out, what I would probably say to them is, listen, I can tell this is important to you and I can tell you're emotional about it. And it's really important to me that I hear you and I create space to hear you. But when you lash out and you're angry at that level, it's not okay with me. And I'm going to end the conversation. When you're ready to approach it from a more regulated, calm state, I'm 100% here for that. And I really want to create that space with you. Okay. And that sets a boundary that the next time that happens, you're like, peace, I'll be over here or call me later, but this ain't happening this way. So sometimes it takes hindsight, right, to see things. And it takes relationships ending to recognize how we are in relationships. And once you realize that you're waiting till the big ball drops or the heavy thing happens, you can start to wake up to the smaller changes that you want to make based on how you're feeling. This is a big shift for people because most people learn because they observe other humans, parents, families, cultures. Most people wait till it's so big it has to be dealt with. That's because most families, most communities, most cultures wait till something is so big they have to deal with it. So if you think about it, human systems, families tend to orient and everyone takes on a role in order to not talk about a thing that's true. The alcoholic father, the narcissistic mother, the abuse, the whatever. So everyone just agrees that we're just not going to talk about this thing. We're not going to explore that thing. We're not going to call this thing out. But what happens is then we need to, right? Like as adults, we're in a relationship and we wonder why our capacity for calling out the truth is for not calling out the truth is so high. Why is our capacity for tolerating dysfunction from ourselves and other people so high? And it's because we've probably endured being part of systems that have modeled super high tolerances for bullshit. So when you wake up to the fact that, you have a certain circumstance that got to a place that you didn't want it to get to, but that's what woke you up. In hindsight, we go, why did it take so long? And we shame the fact that we finally fucking woke up instead of being like, it took the perfect amount of time, the exact amount of momentum, the exact amount of information. Now I'm listening. Okay, I'm ready moving forward to pay attention to the small deviations out of my values, out of what I want, out of my integrity. So to me, life is here's what I think health is all about, relationships are all about. This is, if you do this, you'll be good at everything. And that is being in integrity with your values, and your voice. If you are in integrity with what is right for you, what is good for you, what you want to create in your life, what you desire, the kind of relationship what you want to create. When I say you're in integrity, not just with who you're choosing, but also your choices, your behaviors, your patterns, all of those things. If you get into alignment with your integrity in the choices you're making about exercise, food, all of that stuff, your life will feel light. Your relationships will thrive. And that's because you are, because integrity becomes the number one thing. Telling the truth becomes the number one thing. All right, next question. My husband of 11 years, partner of 14, says he no longer loves me or has feelings for me and needs a passionate relationship and connection. We both want this. We're currently treading water, going to therapy to see if we can create this together. Otherwise, he wants to split up. Any advice on how we might be able to foster this? Is falling out of love a common occurrence? Couples fall back in love. I mean, I think the evidence is pretty large that people can, I wouldn't say fall out of love. I think grow apart, lose connection to one another, not desire to create something with the other person anymore. Maybe a lack of trust, maybe a lack of safety, and what happens in relationship is the honeymoon phase converts to the more friendship type of phase. And people confuse that stable, safe love as a lack of spark or fire, which I don't want to negate your husband's expression that he feels like he no longer loves you or has feelings for you, because that's important information for you to sit with. What I would say is if you're going to therapy and he's saying, I no longer love you or have feelings for you, and he's already saying, um, you're trying to see if you can create that together. Otherwise, he wants to split up. He doesn't have both feet in. And if we don't have both feet in, we can't. Like, how can you create? Like, is he open to the possibility? I love the work of Stan Tatkin. And Dana Mullen is an incredible therapist who works with couples to reignite that spark. Stan Tatkin does the same. And she's trained by Stan Tatkin. And you can find her information on createthelove.com under coaching. But she works with couples to do that. So does Nick Solacek. He's incredible. There's 2 episodes with him on the pod that are really great. So what I would say is, if someone says they're not sure they can create a spark with us, the first thing I would say to them is, if we do this therapy, if we do this work, are we both feet in? Because you got to be both feet in. Now, I'd say the thing that creates a lack of spark in long-term couples is that they forget about themselves as individuals. So a lot of people, especially in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, grew up with relational models where you go into a relationship and you forget about yourself. The relationship is not a place for the self, especially women. We're taught that. So what happens in long-term relationships is there's lots of resentment and there's not a lot of connection and chemistry, because where there's resentment, there can't be connection and chemistry. They're not having sex anymore because they blame each other for there being a lack of connection, for there being a lack of self. So that really kills long-term connection, is that we erase ourselves to be in connection. And then we wake up 14 years later and we're like, holy fuck, I forgot about my dreams. I forgot about myself. You see this happen with when kids leave the home. You see this happen a lot. You see this happen when people retire. You see this happen when, when whatever we're focused on, the thing we're building, we realize we're building and forgetting about ourselves. And so I'd say you're in a beautiful moment of self-remembrance, and that self-remembrance can make it so this relationship is actually now constructed of 2 selves who have personal interests, who have personal lives, who have personal passions. And standing in a self, which is the invitation I would ask of you who's asking the question, is actually saying, this is what I want to create and this is who I want to be. And this is the relationship I'm committed to creating with you. But I'm not creating a spark from someone who's only got 1 foot in. So like, are we going to therapy and both like, fuck yeah, let's do this? Or are we going to therapy and one of us is like, fuck yeah, and the other one's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, if they're just going to therapy to satisfy that, don't do it. Don't waste the fucking money. So, but I think someone who's specialized in that with 2 people who really are all in can rescue, reunite, and deepen their connection and their spark and bring the mystery back. Bring the mystery back. And think about it. Think about ourselves, how much you've changed probably in the last 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 years. The people we're in relationship with are changing too. Like, they're not finished projects. Like, we think we know them, which is total bullshit. We don't know ourselves. We're always discovering ourselves. And if we forget to continue to discover our partners, we will kill the spark. It just happens, right? We think they're predictable, but meanwhile, there's a whole mystery still there. So that's my invitation. All right. I see a question in there. It seems like nobody, Lindsay's asking in the chat, seems like nobody ever talks about what comes next once you have done all the relational work, but then it appears no one has the capacity to build with you. What then? Ooh, Lindsay, you go to different places, you go to different events, you go to conferences, you find yourself in spaces you get addicted to the mystery. You get addicted to possibility, Now, here's the thing. When you do the work and all of a sudden you're like, I want a relationship that's got good communication, growth focused. Each person has their own passions. We want the same things. We're like, my dating pool got smaller. Yeah, that's actually the whole point. But what you might want to ask yourself, Lindsay, is where do people who love what I love and want what I want hang out? And then you start doing those things. I think to myself when I go hiking, I'm like, man, why is not everybody who loves hiking like just meeting people hiking? Like, there's always groups of single people hiking. And I'm like, this is such a brilliant place to meet people who love hiking. I like climbing. I mean, people can meet people, climbing, it's easy. You can meet people at these shared events, at these shared spaces where people are going, taking care of themselves, doing something. And then you meet someone else who's doing the same thing. So I'd say shift the perspective. You can go to space. That's true. You'll meet Elon, but like shift the perspective from, uh, no one has the capacity to build with you to the right person will have the capacity and I'll know them because they're so rare. And because I'm putting myself in the right places in the right circumstances and I'm open to being wrong about this belief, I'm going to meet them. And that is how it happens, right? You like have to be militant, addicted to the possibility, to the potential, to the mystery, live the mystery. Because literally in any moment, you could meet your person in any moment. And it comes when you're like, oh, yeah, today I'm excited to possibly meet my person. And when we approach life from that perspective, and instead of imagine you're starting your day, Lindsay, and you're like, another day, like, not going to meet my person. Like, there's no one who wants to grow. I did all this growth and people don't even like growing. Like, what am I going to do? Where are the singles hiking? They're hiking on hiking trails. Just look up Trail Forks, look up Strava, look up All Trails. All these apps have tons. You can find groups for hiking for sure on the internet. Tons. I see this question from ET. How do you make sense of going from lovers, long-term relationship, to literal strangers after a breakup? Um, Dumper disappeared after breaking it off when his values changed and made us drift apart. Feels like the relationship wasn't worth anything to him. That's often the perspective we have after we've felt discarded or someone moves on. People deal with breakups differently. Some people want to stay friends, other people don't want friendship. Some people move quickly and they're like, I don't even want to know you anymore. I just want to move forward and I want to put this in the past. I don't think there's a wrong way to approach it, like in that perspective. I do think that um, maintaining grace and communication that's healthy on the leaving. I don't think being friends with your ex when there's still emotion is healthy. Especially, we have to learn to process it. We have to create closure ourselves. So, it is a wild thing. Charles Bukowski has a great quote where he talks about that. Like, it's crazy that as humans, we're like in relationship and all of a sudden we're not. Like, it's just wild. And it is wild. Um, but all that matters is the relationship was worth something to you. Believing that it feels like the relationship wasn't worth anything to him, doing that actually just makes your value become in question based on the relationship. Do you see that? Like, it doesn't serve you to actually see it as this person didn't, the relationship, it feels like it wasn't worth anything to them. I can have the grief that the way they're leaving it doesn't feel respectful or kind, but I'm not going to say it wasn't worth anything to them because it was worth something to me. And that's what matters. If my self worth is in question, which is information for the work I need to do, then I might go, I wasn't worth anything. Do you see that distinction? So, this is the opportunity to see that distinction and be able to make, we have to become incredibly diligent about what we make things mean. We could instantly have that story, the exact same story, and I could go, God, the way I handled that was good, was not, right? Like I could say, the relationship meant something to me, and that's all that matters. The relationship was such a powerful shift for me. It also made me realize what I want when relationships end, how I want to handle that, how I want to approach that, because that didn't work for me. This relationship was a great teacher. And we could have the exact same relationship and have one perspective that it was a waste, or you feel like they think it was, and the other person be like, what a teacher. So just make it a teacher, right? We get to decide. Like, our minds are powerful tools. We get to decide what programs we want. Most people don't choose the programs in their mind, right? And look at that. The relationship was the first more healthy relationship. It was the first most healthy relationship one, and it taught me a lot. Exactly. It taught you that you're capable of a healthy relationship, and someone on the ending maybe didn't handle it in a way that you liked, but you know what you like. See that? It's so much more liberating. Don't let the meaning you give to relational experiences and the experiences of your life, don't correlate them to your worth and your value. Make them mean things that are expansive for you. Now, here's the responsibility that comes with that. If you want to see a relationship as having value and being expansive, you actually have to excrete and extract the value from it. You have to actually live the lessons that you learn from the relationship. Now, that's going to demand another level of you. Because if we're playing the victim of our relational experiences, which doesn't mean you haven't experienced victimization, but if we're playing the victim of our relational experiences, then we won't be able to get all of the wisdom from them because we're too busy being a victim of them. But if we use our relational experiences as the catalyst to our evolution and our growth and our potential, then now we'll be grateful for all of them, even the ones that had the most pain, the most betrayal, the most anything, because we will have learned something so powerful from especially those ones. Okay, last question. What does conscious or empowered casual sex look like? I'm getting into dating and I'm wanting to bring in a relationship. I've never been in a serious relationship before. So I hopped on a few dating apps. And it seems most men want casual or friends with benefit sex. And I've never done sex that way either. I can't figure out if this is another way to embrace my power and have casual sex with choice and consciousness, or if it's a way of rejecting what I really want because I don't think I can get it, or because relational intimacy is scary. It's nice to feel wanted sexually, and I want to be loved and wanted for all of me and empowered and in alignment. I don't want to re trigger myself or traumatize myself in a whole new way. I can't tell if this is universe telling me if there is if there's a way to approach casual friends with benefit sex that works for aligned and spiritually conscious people. Whew, this is a great question. I mean, listen, there's no judgment about if you want to have casual sex, you want to bang your hoo-haws out, you want to do all the things, your what is spiritual, your yoni and your hara or whatever the term is. That's vagina and penis in spiritual speak. Listen, it does whatever you want to do. Now, let's get to the first part of the question, which is what does it look like? I'm not going to hit that one first. Hit that, get it. Hey, I'm going to go with the second one, which is I can't figure out. So you said I've never been in a serious relationship before. Okay, that information is important to me in the language that you're using, because I would say if you've never been in a serious relationship, friends with benefits and casual sex, which can sometimes just be bypassed and called conscious, empowered sex, uh, that friends with benefits can be a way that we mitigate or minimize the risk of opening up to people. You know, that we think if you've never been in a serious relationship before and you're wanting one, then because you said, I'm getting into dating and wanting to bring in a relationship. So if you're wanting to bring in a relationship, you have to get very clear about what that relationship is. Now, you can go play around and experience casual, empowered, conscious sex, which, if we are defining that, I would say that's excellent communication. There are rules in terms of what you're going to explore and what you're going to do, safe words. There's aftercare, as in there's communication, there's clarity about safety, there's clarity about what you both desire. What I see a lot, I almost always, is one person tends to catch feelings because one person tends to minimize what they actually want in order to get the relationship. So they settle for a friends with benefits and then they end up wanting something more. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing broken in someone who develops feelings from sex. It's actually totally normal to develop feelings from sex. I'd say the inability to access your heart during sex is probably a sign of unprocessed things to do with intimacy. And sometimes people who are avoidant and have unprocessed stuff in terms of closeness seek friends with benefits and casual sex and dress it up in consciousness. Again, not always true. It just happens a lot. Humans are brilliant at bypassing their bullshit. So, what I would say is if you're going to explore casual conscious sex, explore it from the question of, am I doing this to avoid actually putting myself in a vulnerable, risky space in terms of heart, in terms of opening? Just ask yourself that. Start to explore the edges of that. Because you said you never had a serious relationship, that could be what is being avoided. Doesn't mean it is, but it could be what's being avoided. And as you said, you're very aware of what you're processing because you said, I'm not sure if I'm just afraid of being hurt and afraid of intimacy. Um, And so if you're not sure, there's probably something there. It's just a great thing to explore. What lives in closeness? Why have you never had a serious relationship? Doesn't mean there has to have been a problem, but a great thing to explore is like, why haven't I? What lives in closeness? What did relationships teach me as a kid? What did I learn? A great podcast episode that I did with Sarah Baldwin is attachment and the nervous system. That'd be a great thing to check out. So there's no right or wrong answer as to what you want to choose, because even if you choose conscious friends with benefits, you're going to learn if that's what you actually wanted. And if you choose relationship and choose to really write out what you desire in a relationship, if it's not friends with benefits, then it's not what you should pursue. So that's just some ways to get really in touch with what your boundaries are, what your desires are, but date from that place and also bring creativity to it, bring openness to it. You might want to play and have fun on the way to finding a relationship, or you might want to play and have fun in a relationship. The thing about a long-term or like a relationship that is committed with all the boundaries and the exploration and the expression is that it creates psychological and emotional safety to open up sexually intimately. And that container can be created in many ways. So with all that said, it's been an hour. I love you all. This is recorded. Thanks for the chat. Thanks for asking your questions. I'm going to do this again very soon. And yeah, much love to all of you. Big happy day to you. Talk soon. And I was going to say, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, hit subscribe, because I'm going to be doing this much more. And I love this platform for it.